Agnes Gitau is a partner at the Africa advisory firm GBS Africa, and she joins us now live from London. Thanks so much for coming on the show. So Moi ruled for decades. How do you think the history books will remember him, especially at home? What will be his legacy there?
First, allow me to offer my heartfelt condolences for the family and friends. Moi was loved and loathed in equal measure in Kenya. His legacy is one that is riddled with corruption, a legacy where Kenyans had no freedom of expression, and any different of opinion was seen as enemies of the state. So certainly a legacy that is not good for Kenya. Also, he ruled at a time where the economy was badly mismanaged, and a lot of people suffered under his regime. A lot of people say he did that at a time where there was a lot of strife across the African continent, and Kenya, for the 24 years he was in power, remained relatively calm, perhaps because of his big man politics, whereby anybody who was different in thoughts, different in ideas, was seen more as an enemy rather than welcomed to the country.
And Agnes, how would you say then that he impacted the region?
You know, in his legacy, President Moi ruled at a time when there were a lot of structural changes enforced on African government by the World Bank and IMF, where they needed to change the economy, manage the economy to ensure that, Kenya was not dependent on donor funding. He tried to do that, but riddled with corruption, bad management. Unfortunately, I would love to sit here and say he was a great leader. I grew up under his regime. I was born when Moi was in power until 2002. I did not know any other leader because that was the big man he was. But luckily for us, we have learned. Maybe perhaps the lessons from Moi's regime is what Kenyans have learned. Now we have a very free economy, a country that is excelling in a lot of fronts, a country that welcomes expressions, free expressions of freedom. And maybe that's one lesson or one good thing that came out of his regime, because Kenyans certainly do not want to go where we were 24 years under his leadership.
And just very quickly, what do you think it was that kept him in power for so long?
Well, President Moi he's called the professor of politics. He surrounded himself with a cartel, people who would not whatsoever question his motives or his way of leadership. But at the same time, I must say that he was also protected by Western governments who managed to continue operating in the country despite the abuse of power and human rights abuses in the country. For as long as businesses, Western-led businesses, were able to thrive and excel in Kenya, he was still in power. So suddenly he was allowed to stay in power. Moi was not successful by himself. He was what he was because of the people he surrounded himself with. And unfortunately, those people are still around as we speak.
Agnes Gitau, thank you so much for speaking to us on the News Hour. Really appreciate it.